Hello, welcome to Movie Musters. Power Book 3, Raising Kanan Season 4 Episode 2 sees mostly everyone in a good place. But is this the calm before the storm? Does anyone else feel like everything is going a little too well for everyone right now? This season is about everyone figuring out what comes next for them, and while the optimism is great, it's starting to feel like the calm before the storm. There were one too many bright spots during Power Book 3, Raising Kanan Season 4 Episode 2, and as we know, in the Power universe, those moments don't tend to last. Courtesy of Stars. After the flashbacks that were Power Book 3, Raising Kanan Season 4 Episode 1, this hour was all about diving into the aftermath of Ronnie and Howard's deaths, and for Raq, her main concern was making sure she and her family were no longer on the Fed's radar. Part of the reason Raq killed Howard was because he was never someone she was going to be able to fully trust. He may have wanted to protect her and Kanan, and she may have even wanted to believe that, but at the end of the day, Howard wasn't someone she could depend on. He had Marvin's name in his mouth a little too much, and even though he had helped her in some ways as law enforcement, his threat was more significant than what he could do for her. But she did pull that trigger, not even thinking about what it could mean for Kanan. She once again made a decision that would affect Kanan and had no care or thought about it. Kanan asking his mother whether or not she even knew the difference between right and wrong felt like his way of telling her that she had lost her damn mind and someone he no longer recognized. Obviously, he's been looking at his mother strangely for a long while, but her actions continue to push him further and further away, and maybe worst of all, they have him questioning her entire existence. Courtesy of Stars. Ultimately, we know that Kanan will eventually be a man with no concept of right or wrong, solely focused on protecting himself, so he'll basically become Raq. But at one point in this origin story, does he stop hating his mother and embrace her misguided ways of thinking? I won't lie, I'd forgotten where Snaps and Pop fit into everything, but they weren't ready to let Kanan off the hook with Ronnie gone. There was still money to be made, and they were going to make it, even if it wasn't what Kanan. What was interesting about the meeting between the three and Raq was how much Raq took a back seat. Now, she was majorly outmanned, but when did that stop her? Early in the season, she adopts this attitude of being less mom and more business partner, making for an intriguing layer in their dynamic. Raq typically would have Kanan's back no matter what, but she more or less let him fight his own battle and then used Snaps and Pop's own words to almost scare him about their current tenuous partnership. If she can't trust Kanan will be loyal, as Snaps and Pop implied, why should she work with him? Courtesy of Stars. Kanan needs Raq more than Raq needs Kanan, and if the only way she can have Kanan in her life is via the business, then Raq's certainly going to do everything within her power to ensure that she can control him there. Dealing with Kanan could be a full-time job, but Raq also had Quan raising prices on her and the continued threat of the feds, who were more or less backing off her but making a play for Stefano. The whole turning on Stefano thing was a throwaway line, and you have to assume it'll be off the table now that Andre's dead, more on that soon, but miscommunication has always been a common theme in the Power universe. Word gets back to Stefano that there's a price on his head, and he finds out Raq knew and never told him. Maybe as payback for going behind her back to strike up some enforcer-for-hire arrangement with Marvin. Yeah, that won't end well for everyone. However, when that news eventually comes out, Raq may be a supplier. Courtesy of Stars. I have no idea how Raq could be a supplier for a whole city, but she could, I guess. Of course, this may end up being dependent upon Unique not screwing up her entire life before she gets the chance. Unique's not well, and it truly does feel like his body is being fed by pure adrenaline and revenge. He's not able to think clearly, his mind perhaps physically damaged but also consumed by what happened to him. He almost died and lost everything, and now he's back, and his old life has been erased. On the one hand, you can't even blame Unique for his anger, but he's also just an emotional storm cloud walking around and making decisions without even a speck of. He followed Raq, saw her and Andre hug, and thus decided that he had to die. Is that just going to be his plan moving forward? Kill everyone associated with Raq until he can pop out of the shadows one day and say, I'm back. Old Unique would have found a way to sabotage her operations, but it's easy to see this is not the same Unique. Speaking of people changing, Jukebox and Lulu came into this hour one way and left another. For Jukebox, she was going through basic training and having committed to the army, something they've been showing us over time she was interested in. Ultimately, we know Jukebox will become a cop, which is not what you'd expect from her, especially after this hour, but her tale is still unfolding. Her decision to quit the army wasn't because she couldn't handle it, in fact, she was killing it, but more so because she would have always had to hide who she was. And that was something she'd already experienced in her young years and didn't want to go back to. I'm pretty sure just absconding from basic training will come with consequences, but Jukebox didn't need to be there in the army with all that hateful rhetoric, stifling her until she became a shell of herself. Even though we know where Jukebox ends up, her story has been so intriguing because of how far removed she's felt from the business side of things related to her family. Might this be the season she starts to integrate herself into the fold? I always thought part of the reason Jukebox ended up becoming a cop was so she could become an intermediary for her family and the police department. Become the new Howard, if you will, but with much more loyalty. Breaking things off with Aisha and no Buddha or Army leaves Jukebox's storyline for this season more unclear. But it would be a perfect time to start teasing more about who she'll ultimately become in the future. Lulu came out of rehab with a new lease on life and a deeper appreciation for it. He recognized that he had been given this gift, and at least to this point, he wasn't content to squander it. The music aspect of Raising Kanan has never been the most compelling, and nothing about this guerrilla stuff was particularly gripping. But that's not to say I won't be rooting for Lulu and wondering how Joyce's illness will affect him and the rest of his siblings. Lulu has made such great strides, but learning that his mother is dying will be emotional, as well as the continued estrangement from Raq. The siblings' experience will undoubtedly leave scars on them, and it'll be fascinating to see how they navigate it alongside the rest of what they're trying to accomplish this season. Picking at old wounds only causes you to create new scars. Everything else you need to know. Famous is missing, and Kanan is a little too calm about it. What do you think happened to him? I won't lie, I vaguely remember his storyline during Power Book 3, Raising Kanan Season 3. Marvin's growth is well documented, but he's still a major hothead. I fear Gerald's betrayal will only serve to push him back into past habits when he should be moving forward. Baptiste should just cut his losses. Why he's trying to go on some crusade campaign for Howard, of all people, makes no sense. He is not the one to risk your life or career over. Was the conversation between Crystal and Kanan foreshadowing her getting pregnant again and keeping the baby against Kanan's wishes? If the premiere felt like an appetizer, then this hour felt like we were, at the very least, getting to the soup or salad portion. There's plenty to discuss after this one, so drop your comments below. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching.